Hello Horror Hounds, welcome to my horror house. I am just back from having seen Scream 6 and wanted to share my initial ill thought through feelings on the movie. For context, I'm a huge fan of the Scream franchise and I absolutely loved the previous movie, Scream 5. I thought it pulled off the very tricky task of walking the tightrope between honouring the legacy of the films that had come before and striking out in slightly fresh new ground, whilst at the same time feeling absolutely like a vital Scream movie that wasn't simply beholden to nostalgia. Scream 6, my initial response to it is a movie that I like a lot but don't love straight off the bat, although I will allow that there is potentially there's room there for my like to grow into love, depending on where now this movie sits in the ongoing franchise, because mark my words, there will be a Scream 7. The opening box office weekend for Scream 6 is the largest that there has ever been for an entry in the franchise, so there will be a Scream 7. And I think the story that is at play here, one of the reasons I don't initially love it is it feels the least like a Scream movie for me, but I think that's an absolutely necessary development for this new cast and these new stories that they are telling, if they're going to move forwards, so it just doesn't feel like the same old thing reheated over and over again. The film is now set in New York, as was made abundantly clear in the trailers, and that does give it a new feel. It does give it a new vibe, seeing some of these murders take place in crowded locations, and a lot of it is set at night, you know, in the city that never sleeps. That Woodsboro flavour is gone, but the film does acknowledge that this is not the first time, as they say in their universe, a stab movie, but as we know, a Scream movie doesn't take place in Woodsboro. The events of Scream 2 took place on a college campus. The setting gives some of the kills a sense of directness and urgency and viciousness that we don't often see in a Scream movie. And the ghost face here, as a result, seems much more straightforward, direct, and brutal. Which, now I say that out loud, reminds me that that's exactly what I thought of the ghost face in Scream 2, more brutal than the first one. So perhaps there are parallels at play there. I mean, the kills are nasty. I'll give it that. This ghost face feels more like a Terminator ghost face than some of the others. Not that they seem supernatural or unstoppable. They just seem to be more of a powerhouse, whereas some ghost faces of the past, something that I really appreciate, are not averse to taking a shot to the nuts or a frying pan to the head. They take some of the ghost faces of the past, take their licks. I thought the cast were superb. I said in my time when I talked about Scream 5 that I was really looking forward to this new cast to sort of get another chance to bed in and grow, and they've all done that. Mason Gooding as Chad and Jasmine Savoy Brown as Mindy, Randy's niece and nephew. I find myself really glad to welcome them back, glad to have them on screen. Jenna Ortega as Tara is as good in this as she was in the previous movie. Last time round I was a bit lukewarm, it must be said, with Melissa Barrera's performance as Sam, and I've jettisoned that now. I think she's absolutely fantastic in this. She has now a connection with Jenna Ortega. I see those two as sisters. I can sort of maybe write off that awkwardness in the previous movie with them having sort of been separated and distanced for a number of years. But these four core returning characters from the previous movie have a connection now, and there's a chemistry there that is palpable. Weirdly enough, as the film starts and you see them each differently negotiating the fallout from the massacre from the previous year for them in their timeline, I found myself thinking, man, I could quite happily just watch these guys getting on with their lives, some of them trying to move on, some of them stuck in the past. I'm happy to spend time with them. I'm happy to see what they're up to, and could conceivably just watch a whole lot more of that. But it's a Scream movie, and Ghostface turns up to start fucking with them and killing people, as they should, and that's all to the good. The absolute standout sequence for me is the subway train sequence. I don't think it's a coincidence that they used a very truncated form of that as their teaser trailer, to just say, well, look, almost as a sort of ship in a bottle. Look, this is Scream 6. This is a little representative section of the movie you're going to get. And I think it worked fantastically well as a teaser. As a more expanded sequence that has time to develop and build tension, I thought it worked like absolute gangbusters. The New York setting, I think, was necessary, interesting, and yes, there is a nod to Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan in it, which I appreciated, but much more I appreciate the fact that the entire movie takes place in New York rather than just the final 10 minutes. There's an interesting little subplot at play here with internet conspiracy theories, and I realise when the film had finished that I had allowed quite a lot of Scream fan online theories to colour my expectations about what was going to happen in this movie, which I think it's really fun that they lent into that and fucked with me about those expectations. I think that's probably about as meta as you can get. I'm not entirely convinced by the killer reveal. So when I say killer, please understand, I'm being as spoiler-free as possible. So I'm just being generic. I'm not confirming that there is one killer or two killers or three killers or four or five. I'm just using bland language. The killer monologue at the end of a Scream movie is a tricky thing to pull off. I do think that it veers slightly too much into cartoony sort of Scooby-Doo-y territory here. I was a big fan of the killer reveal and monologue in Scream 5. I know that turned a lot of people off. Clearly the greatest of all time was Matthew Lillard and Skeet Ulrich at the end of the original Scream, but I thought Emma Roberts did a fantastic job in Scream 4 as well. There's a tightrope to walk with it, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. For me, Scream 6, it kind of didn't, which is a pity. Sometimes the killer reveal can make or break a movie like this. And while the reveal and the monologuing wasn't necessarily, for me, it wasn't enough to break the movie. But as I say, it's a movie that I like a lot, and there is room for that to develop into a much bigger appreciation depending now on where the story goes. And it will go somewhere else. And I think Scream 6 will be seen as the necessary stepping stone to now propel forwards. They're in a place now, narrative-wise, where they could, if they wanted to, strip back or even potentially not have at all references to previous legacy movies if they didn't want to. I think they've paid their dues with tipping the hat to the movies that came before them, and if they wanted to, now they can strike off on their own, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. So whilst I didn't get the sort of warm, fuzzy, I'm watching a Scream movie feels washing over me like I did from Part 5, I think that's probably in the long run going to be a good thing rather than a negative. And it might be something that in years to come I praise Scream 6 for, rather than sitting in front of you now having just seen it and saying, it doesn't quite feel like a Scream movie to me. Because it is a Scream movie. It's got the cast back, it's got Ghostface in it, and Ghostface is a mean son of a bitch in this movie. Strangely, there are a few references to Argento, and I felt no Argento influence in Scream 6 whatsoever. I would love to see filmmakers do something other than playing lip service to the maestro and really trying to get under the skin of what Dario was able to do in the giallo tradition, which let's face it, the slasher tradition is an offshoot of giallo. So, but that's a tiny little thing. But yeah, if Scream 7 could really actually lean into the work of Argento, boy, we would have something really special then. But I'd find, as with having just seen, when I just sort of came back from Scream 5, was keen to see what they would do with the next one. I find myself in the position of now being very keen to see what they will do with Scream 7, and that can only really suggest to me a franchise that's in rude health. So long live Ghostface, because that mask will return.
I bid you welcome.
I welcome you to my house.
Welcome to my house.
Welcome to my home.